my name does not matter, because I am no different from millions of mothers across the world. What matters is my story, a story that begins with hardship, continues with sacrifice, and ends with nothing but love. I was not born into wealth or comfort. My earliest memories are of broken walls, torn clothes, and nights where hunger echoed louder than silence. But even in those days, I still had hope, because I believed life might become easier one day. But life had other plans for me. When I was still young, I lost my husband. One moment he was here, the next he was gone, leaving me alone with 3 little children. I still remember their eyes that night wide, innocent, confused. They did not understand what had happened. They only knew that their father was never coming back, and that I was all they had left. I had no money, no land, no family ready to help. All I had were my children, my only treasure in this world, and my 2 hands. That day, I made a promise to myself. No matter how much pain I go through, no matter how many nights I starve, I will never let my children suffer. The world looked at me as a weak, helpless widow. They whispered behind my back, "How will she raise them? How long before she gives up?" But what they did not know was that a mother never gives up. A mother does not surrender. I became both father and mother to my children. Every morning, I woke up before the sun, tied my torn scarf, and went out to find work. Some days I washed clothes in the houses of strangers. Other days I carried water on my head from faraway wells. My body ached, my hands bled, but I never complained, because every coin I earned meant bread for my children, and every tear I hid meant a smile on their faces. There were times when I felt completely alone, standing in the middle of the world with no one to lean on. But then I would hear the soft voices of my children calling me, "Amy, we're hungry." And suddenly, my loneliness turned into strength. I realized I was not living for myself anymore. I was living for them. This is who I am. Not a rich woman, not an educated one, not someone powerful in the eyes of the world. But I am a mother, and my story is a story of sacrifice. My children, they were my only treasure in this world. I had nothing else to my name, no gold, no land, no savings. But when I looked at their faces, I felt richer than the wealthiest of kings. I still remember how their little hands would tug at my clothes when they were hungry. Their innocent eyes would look into mine, searching for answers I did not have. Sometimes they would ask, "Amy, why don't we have new clothes like the other children?" And every time, my heart would break into pieces. I had no way to give them what they wanted, yet I could never let them see my pain. So I smiled and said, "One day, my loves, one day you will have everything you deserve." At night, when they slept, I would sit beside them and watch. Their small bodies curled up under thin sheets, their breaths soft and gentle. They did not know how much I cried in silence, praying that their future would not be as harsh as mine. I would whisper to Allah, "Take everything from me, but never let harm come to them." Food was always scarce. There were days when we had nothing but a single piece of bread. tore it into 3 pieces and gave it to them. When they asked me why I wasn't eating, I smiled and said, "I'm not hungry, my dear ones." But the truth was, my stomach was burning with hunger. Still, I would rather starve 1,000 times than let them go to bed with empty stomachs. They were too young to understand what sacrifice meant. To them, I was just their mother, the one who cooked, who worked, who scolded them when they misbehaved, and who kissed them when they cried. But deep down, I knew that every breath I took, every step I walked, was only for them. Their laughter was my medicine. When they played with broken toys in the dirt, their giggles filled the air like music. Even though we had nothing, they found joy in little things. And I found strength in their joy. Their happiness was like a light in the darkest nights of my life. I often thought about the future. What would happen when they grew older? Would I be able to keep my promise of giving them a better life? Fear sat heavy in my chest, but I pushed it away. Because a mother cannot afford to be weak in front of her children. So I carried my burdens silently. I wore my pain like armor. And each day I reminded myself, these children are my world. As long as they are safe, as long as they smile, I have everything I need. Yes, I was poor in the eyes of the world, but in my heart, I was the richest woman alive, because I had them. Hunger, it became my closest companion. Day after day, night after night, it lived inside me. But I never allowed my children to see it. There were countless evenings when the kitchen was empty, when not a single grain of rice or piece of bread was left. My children would look at me with innocent eyes and say, "Amy, are we going to eat tonight?" In that moment, I had only 2 choices, to break down and show them the truth, or to smile and give them hope. And every time, I chose to smile. I remember one particular night. We had only 1 piece of bread. My children sat in front of me, their tiny hands waiting. I tore the bread into 3 pieces and gave it to them. They asked, "Amy, what about you?" I forced a smile and said, "I am not hungry, my loves. Eat and sleep well." But when they closed their eyes, satisfied with their small portion, I drank a glass of water and pressed my empty stomach, whispering to myself, "Your hunger does not matter. Their smile does." The hunger grew so familiar that my body became used to it. My hands trembled, my head spun, my bones ached from weakness. But even in my weakest moments, I pretended to be strong. Because if I showed my pain, my children would lose their courage. And a mother cannot let her children lose hope. I worked in the houses of others, scrubbing floors until my knees hurt, washing piles of clothes until my fingers cracked. Sometimes they gave me leftover food. I never ate it myself. I would wrap it carefully, bring it home, and place it in front of my children as if it were a feast. Their eyes would shine with excitement, and in that moment, I felt full not in my stomach, but in my heart. But there were also days when even that was not enough. Days when all I could do was tell them bedtime stories to distract them from their hunger. I made up tales of kings and queens, of magical lands filled with food and laughter. As I spoke, I watched their eyelids grow heavy, and I thanked Allah that they could sleep without realizing their pain. People often wonder how a mother can survive without food. The truth is, we don't survive. We suffer silently. We break silently. But our love gives us strength to endure the impossible. My hunger was a wound I never healed, but I wore it proudly, like a badge of love, because every time I starved, my children lived. And for me, that was enough. Yes, I was weak. My body was fragile. But my heart was made of steel. And as long as I could keep them fed, even at the cost of my own life, I felt like the richest mother in the world. I hid my hunger so well that my children believed I was strong. But only I knew the truth, that behind every smile was an ocean of pain. And yet, if I were given the choice again, I would choose the same pain, because their lives were worth more than mine. Each day of my life felt like a mountain pressing down on my shoulders. The weight of struggles never left me, not in the morning when I opened my eyes, not at night when I tried to sleep. It followed me like a shadow. I woke up before the sun, long before my children opened their eyes. My body ached from yesterday's work, but there was no time for rest. Poverty does not give you the luxury of rest. I would tie my scarf, pick up a bucket, and walk miles to fetch water. The road was long and rough, my feet swollen, but I kept walking because my children needed water to drink, to wash, to live. When I returned, I would prepare whatever little food I could manage. Some mornings, it was only a piece of dry bread and tea made from hot water with a pinch of sugar, if I even had sugar. My children would eat quietly, never complaining, though their eyes revealed their hunger. I admired their patience, their innocence. It gave me courage to face another day. After feeding them, I would leave for work. I cleaned the houses of strangers, scrubbed their floors, polished their dishes, washed their piles of dirty clothes. My fingers would bleed from the soap, my back bent from the heavy loads. Sometimes, when I asked for payment, they delayed it. Sometimes, they gave less than promised. And sometimes, they gave nothing at all. Yet I could not protest. I could not fight. I swallowed my anger, my pride, my dignity, because I knew that even a single coin was worth more than my feelings. That single coin meant bread for my children, but the weight of struggles was not only physical, it was emotional. Society has a cruel way of reminding the poor of their poverty. Neighbors would whisper, "Her husband is gone. What future will her children ever have?" Relatives mocked me. A woman alone cannot raise children. They will grow up like beggars. Every word was like a knife in my chest. But I stayed silent. I did not argue. I did not cry in front of them. Instead, I saved my tears for the nights when my children slept. Alone in the darkness, I let my heart break. Then, by morning, I stitched it back together with courage. Sometimes I questioned myself. Am I doing enough? Am I strong enough? Will my children ever forgive me for not giving them the life they deserve? The doubts haunted me like ghosts, but then I would remember their smiles, their laughter. And suddenly, my doubts turned into strength. The world saw me as weak, as helpless. But the truth was, I was stronger than they could ever imagine, because I carried not just my struggles, but the dreams of 3 innocent souls who depended on me. Their lives rested on my shoulders, and no matter how heavy the burden became, I refused to drop it. Yes, I was tired. Yes, I was broken. But every step I took, every hardship I endured, I did it with love. Because that is what it means to be a mother. To carry the weight of the world silently, without expecting anything in return. I will never forget that night. The night when the sky seemed to open its gates and pour down endless rain upon our broken home. Our roof was nothing more than a few pieces of rusted tin and weak wooden beams. It had survived many storms before, but that night was different. The rain was heavier, the winds stronger, the darkness colder. As the storm raged outside, my children huddled close to me, their tiny bodies trembling with fear. Water began dripping from the ceiling, first in small drops, then in steady streams. Soon, the floor was wet, the blankets damp, and the air filled with the sound of thunder. My children cried out, "Ammy, we're scared. Ammy, the roof is breaking." I gathered them in my arms, pressing their heads against my chest, whispering softly, "Don't be afraid, my loves. I am here. As long as I breathe, nothing will harm you." The wind howled like a wild beast, pushing against our fragile walls. I stretched out my arms like wings, shielding my children with my body. Cold rain poured over my back as I bent myself over them, making myself their roof. My clothes clung to me, soaked and heavy, but I did not move. My only thought was, let the storm tear me apart, but it will not touch my children. As the night dragged on, my strength began to fade. My body shivered uncontrollably. My lips turned numb. But each time I felt weakness pulling me down, I looked at their little faces, eyes shut tight, tears mixing with raindrops, and I found strength again. I prayed silently in that moment, my heart speaking to Allah. "Ya Allah, if you wish to test me, then test me with pain, with hunger, with sleepless nights. But please, please, never let my children suffer. Take my warmth, take my health, take my life if you must, but protect them." The storm continued for hours. I could hear the sound of tin sheets rattling, of wood cracking, of water gushing inside. But still, I did not let go. My arms ached, my back screamed in pain, but I held them tighter. They were all I had, and I was all they had. At last, when the morning came, the storm began to die. The rain slowed, the thunder faded, and the first light of dawn slipped into our broken shelter. My children slowly opened their eyes, tired but safe. They looked up at me and smiled weakly. One of them whispered, "Ammy, you kept us safe." I could not hold back my tears. I kissed their wet hair and held them close, whispering back, "As long as I live, I will always keep you safe. That night left me weak and sick for many days, but it also gave me something priceless. It reminded me of the strength I never knew I had. A mother's love is stronger than storms, stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. Yes, the roof above us may have been broken, but I became the roof for my children, and that was enough. There came a time when my life felt like a marketplace of sacrifices. Every day, I sold a piece of myself just so my children could live another day. I still remember the day I took out the only gold bangles I had, small, old, given to me by my mother when I got married. They weren't worth much, but to me, they were memories, the last link to my own childhood dreams. My hands trembled as I placed them in the shopkeeper's palm. He weighed them like lifeless metal, while for me, they carried the weight of my entire past. He gave me money, and I walked out silently, hiding my tears. That money became bread, milk, and school books for my children. My memories turned into their survival. But not all sacrifices were made of metal or cloth. Some were carved out of my own body. There were nights when we had only enough food for the children. They ate with innocent smiles, while I drank only water, clutching my stomach as hunger clawed inside me. Sometimes my body shook so violently from weakness that I could barely stand. Yet, when my children looked at me and asked, "Amy, why aren't you eating?" I forced a smile and said, "I am not hungry, my loves. Seeing you eat fills me." My children were young, but not blind. One night, my eldest son held my hand and whispered, "Amy, we know you're hungry. Please eat some." His little voice broke me more than hunger ever could. But I kissed his forehead and lied again. A mother's stomach is never empty. It is always full with her children's happiness. Even my health became something I put up for sale without asking. I worked with fever burning inside me, my body aching, my breath heavy. Some days, I felt as if my bones were crumbling, but I kept moving because illness was a luxury I could not afford. Rest was for the rich, survival was for the poor. And then there were the dreams, the little wishes I once held for myself. I used to dream of a small house with strong walls, of wearing clothes that weren't patched 100 times, of maybe buying a book just for me, to read under a lamp at night. But each dream I had, I crushed with my own hands. I gave them up one by one, because my children's future was more important than my comfort. Sometimes I passed by shops with dresses displayed in the windows, bright colors, shiny fabrics. For a moment, the woman inside me longed to wear them. But then I looked at the thin shoes on my children's feet, their school bags stitched with thread, and I turned away. Their needs were my ornaments, their survival my luxury. Society never saw this. To the world, I was just another poor widow, struggling to survive. They saw the ragged clothes, the tired face, the worn-out body. But they never saw what I gave up every single day. They never saw how many dreams I buried quietly, how many times I killed my own desires just to keep my children alive. My children sometimes asked me, "Amy, what did you want to be when you were young?" I would pause, my throat tightening. What could I say? That once I dreamed of becoming a teacher, that I wanted to study, to hold books, to stand in front of a classroom with pride. I swallowed my truth and replied softly, I only wanted to be your mother. And that dream came true. Yes, I sold my jewelry, my health, my hunger, and my dreams. But I never saw it as loss, because each sacrifice became a seed planted in the soil of my children's lives. One day, I knew those seeds would bloom into something greater. And if anyone asks me what it cost, what I gave up, I will simply smile and say, everything, but it was worth it. Life has a way of surprising you. Even in the darkest nights, Alice sends small stars, tiny rays of hope that remind you not to give up. For me, those rays of hope came from my children. One evening, after a long, exhausting day, I came home with only a small piece of bread and some tea leaves. My heart broke as I placed the bread in front of them, wishing I had more. But instead of fighting over it, they tore it into equal parts and shared it with each other. My youngest smiled and said, Amy, today we are eating like kings. I couldn't hold back my tears. How could such little hearts carry such big courage? Another time, my daughter brought home a flower she had picked from the roadside. She placed it in an old, broken cup and told me, Amy, now our home looks beautiful. For the world, it was just a weed. But for me, it was proof that happiness can bloom even in the hardest soil. My eldest son once came running to me with his school report card. His shoes were torn, his shirt faded, but his eyes shone brighter than diamonds. Amy, I stood first in class, he said, holding out the paper with trembling hands. I hugged him tightly, my tears wetting his hair. At that moment, every sacrifice I had ever made felt worth it. Hunger, pain, loneliness, none of it mattered, because my child was shining. Even strangers, sometimes, became my rays of hope. Once, when I could not pay for medicine, the pharmacist looked at me with kind eyes and whispered, Take it. Pay when you can. Another time, a neighbor left a bag of rice at my doorstep and never admitted it was them. These small acts reminded me that humanity still existed, that Allah's mercy worked through people. But the greatest hope came from within myself. Every time I thought I could not survive another day, I heard a voice in my heart whisper, You are stronger than this storm. You are a mother, and a mother never breaks. Slowly, I realized that hope is not about waiting for life to be easy. Hope is about finding light in the middle of struggle. It is about laughing even when you are hungry, smiling even when you are broken, and walking even when your feet are bleeding. I taught my children this. I told them, we may be poor, but we are not weak. We may have nothing, but we are not empty. As long as we have faith, we have everything. And they believed me. They began to dream. My son wanted to be a doctor. My daughter wanted to be a teacher. They would sit at night under a dim lantern, reading borrowed books, their lips moving silently as they learned. Their determination became my strength. Yes, life gave me endless reasons to cry. But these small rays of hope, my children's laughter, their kindness, their dreams, gave me endless reasons to keep living. They were my sunrise after the longest night. They were proof that even broken wings can still fly. And so I held on to them, to their hope, like a lifeline. Because if they believed tomorrow could be better, how could I not believe too? Night was always my companion, my witness. When the world slept, I stayed awake, alone with my thoughts, my pain, and my Creator. I would sit on the cold floor, the lantern flickering weakly, while my children slept beside me, their breaths soft and innocent. In those moments, I let my heart pour out in silence. My lips moved, but no one heard me except Allah. My tears fell, but no one wiped them except Him. Sometimes I prayed with words, Ya Allah, give me strength. Ya Allah, don't let my children sleep hungry. Ya Allah, cover their shame with your mercy. And sometimes I prayed only with tears, because words were too small to carry the weight of my pain. I told Allah things I could not tell anyone else. I told Him about the humiliation when people mocked me for being poor. I told Him about the fear that my children would grow up without education, trapped in the same cycle of suffering. I told Him about the loneliness that ate at my soul every night, but I also thanked Him. I thanked Him for every breath my children took, for every small smile, for every little blessing that kept us alive. Even in my brokenness, I could see His mercy. If He had left me, I would not have survived even a single day. Sometimes my children would wake up in the middle of the night and find me with swollen eyes. My daughter once asked, Ammi, why do you cry at night? I kissed her and replied, These are not tears, my love. This is how a mother washes her heart so she can smile for you in the morning. Prayer became my strength. Each night I placed my worries in Allah's hands, and each morning I rose again, ready to fight the world. My body was weak, but my faith was iron. I believed no, I knew that Allah was listening, and He gave me signs. One day, when I had no food, a neighbor knocked on my door with a plate of rice. Another time, when I feared losing my home, the landlord unexpectedly forgave a month's rent. These were not accidents. These were answers, quiet, gentle answers from the One who never forgets His servants. I realized that my silent prayers were not just for survival. They were seeds of hope planted in the unseen. Maybe the world did not hear me. Maybe my children did not know the depth of my cries, but Allah knew. And I believed one day those silent prayers would bloom into a life better than the one I had. Yes, the world saw me as a tired mother with nothing left. But what they could not see was the strength of a woman on her prayer mat, whispering to the heavens, refusing to let go of faith. If you ask me how I endured hunger, humiliation, and endless struggle, I will tell you this. I did not endure alone. My silent prayers carried me. My tears turned into shields. My whispers became my weapons. And every time I felt like falling, Allah's mercy lifted me again. so I never feared the silence of the night, because in that silence I was never alone. For years, my life felt like a battlefield where every day was a struggle for survival. But then came a day I will never forget. The day when all my silent prayers and sacrifices began to show their colors. It started with my eldest son. He had always been different, quiet, serious, with a fire in his eyes that hunger could not dim. He studied late into the nights under the weak glow of a borrowed lantern, his books second-hand, his pencils short, his notebooks filled with scribbles between torn pages. I often watched him from a corner, my heart breaking at the sight. Yet, inside me, a tiny spark of hope flickered. One afternoon, he came rushing home, breathless, holding a piece of paper in his hands. His clothes were dusty, his shoes torn, but his face glowed brighter than the sun. "Ammy, Ammy," he shouted, waving the paper. My heart raced. He placed it in my hands. It was a scholarship letter. My son had been selected for higher studies, with full support for his education. At first, I could not believe it. My trembling hands held the letter, my tears falling on the ink. I looked at him, and in his eyes I saw not just my son, but the proof that none of my sacrifices had been wasted. For the first time in years, I cried not from pain, but from overwhelming joy. That night, my children gathered around me, their faces glowing with excitement. My daughter hugged me and whispered, "Ammy, one day I will become a teacher and help you too." My youngest chimed in, "And I will build you a strong house, Ammy, with no holes in the roof." Their words were like music, sweeter than anything I had ever heard. For the first time, the future did not look like a storm. It looked like a sunrise. But the turning point was not only about my son's scholarship. It was about what it meant for all of us. It meant that poverty was not a life sentence. It meant that my children's dreams could grow wings and fly beyond the walls of our broken home. It meant that all the nights I stayed hungry, all the jewelry I sold, all the tears I cried in silence, they had turned into stepping stones for a better tomorrow. I realized something powerful that day. Life does not change overnight with miracles. It changes through patience, faith, and the courage to keep walking even when the road feels endless. The scholarship letter was not just a piece of paper. It was Allah's gentle whisper telling me, "Your prayers were never ignored." Neighbors who once mocked us now looked at my son with admiration. Relatives who once doubted me began to say, "She raised her children well." Their words no longer mattered to me. What mattered was the pride shining in my children's eyes and the peace blooming in my heart. For years, I had been the roof that protected my children. Now, I could finally see them becoming the walls and pillars that would protect me. The weight of my struggles began to lighten, replaced by the warmth of hope. And that day, for the first time in a long time, I dared to dream again, not for myself, but for them. A dream of a future where my children would walk proudly, where their names would be respected, where they would never have to taste the bitterness of hunger or humiliation. That was the turning point of my life, the moment when pain transformed into purpose and tears turned into triumph. Years passed, and the seeds of sacrifice I had planted began to bloom. My children grew not just in age, but in strength, wisdom, and dreams. The day my son graduated as a doctor, I sat in the crowd wearing the same old clothes I had worn for years. But in that moment, I felt richer than kings. When he walked across the stage, holding his certificate, I saw my husband's unfulfilled dreams shining in his eyes. My heart whispered, "We did it, my child, we did it." My daughter, too, stood tall as a teacher, guiding young children with the same patience and love she once showed me. My youngest, who had promised to build me a house, kept his word. One day, he brought me to a small, strong home, no holes in the roof, no fear of storms. As I stepped inside, I could not hold back my tears. For years, I had been their shelter. Now, they had become mine. Neighbors who once mocked me now sent their children to my daughter's school, visited my son for treatment, and greeted me with respect. People who once whispered behind my back now said, "This mother is blessed. She raised her children with nothing, yet gave them everything." But the truth is, I gave them only my love, my tears, my hunger, my prayers. And they turned all of that into something beautiful. As I sat in my new home one evening, my children gathered around me. Laughter filled the room, food filled the table, and peace filled my heart. I looked at them and thought, this is my wealth. This is my pride. This is the reward of every silent prayer, every sleepless night, every sacrifice. I was no longer just a mother who struggled. I was a mother who conquered. And if you ask me today what my greatest achievement is, I will not say it was surviving poverty, or enduring storms, or selling my dreams. I will simply smile and say, my children, they are my greatest pride, because at the end of the day, a mother's true success is not in what she keeps, but in what she gives. Speech balloon friends, if this story touched your heart, do let us know in the comments below.